Wow, look at that. Internet. What's up, internet? Good to be back. I love you, internet. You're my only friend. It's like when Abba Zaba, what was that movie? He's like, I love you, Abba Zaba. You're my only friend. Well, actually, internet, you're my only friend. So it's always good to be back. But I'm back here with you this evening with friends. We're joined by, once again, Kier Adrian Gray of Recovering Anarchist. We have Anne in the background, and we have Mike Suave.
Sauve. Nobody ever says it right. Need an accent. It's okay though.
He's wearing a toque. Earlier, he said he was going to smuggle an earbud at school underneath the toque. And when you said toque, I was like, I didn't know you were Canadian. So yeah, I guess it's just like a Canadian takeover here on the internet. But we are here because here in a few short days, the submission deadline for the Theory Underground volumes, anthologies, collections, whatever they are, will be here. And a lot of us have been doing a lot of work of late. And I don't know, it's noteworthy. I kind of wanted to take some time to reflect on that, to decompress, and to congratulate everybody. I know when I submitted to Theory Underground for the first time, it was like pulling teeth. And Dave and Ann both really held my hand through the whole thing. And I was like, I don't care anymore. I quit. I give up. I go home. Screw you guys. I hate you. And they were like, no, it's important. And they helped me through it. So I know some people have been published all over the place. Some people have not been published anywhere. But everybody is publishing something, or everybody that is publishing something with Theory Underground is an accomplishment. And you should be proud of yourself. You shouldn't be afraid to like congratulate yourself and acknowledge that you've done something worth doing. And I wanted to acknowledge that as well. So thank you for all your hard work. And now I guess let's kind of open it up informally. If we want to shoot the shit, if we want to ask questions, if we want to complain or whatever. Let's get into it. And Jacob is here in the YouTube chat. If we stay up late, I might take a smoke break. I don't think we'll be up too late, Jacob, but maybe we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Right on. Well, okay. First of all, Mike, I think we should all learn how to say your name properly. I think that's a great.
It's sauve. So like
Sauve.
French verb to save. If we got any French speakers, but yeah, nobody. I think there's a strong inclination to transpose that U and that A because get a lot of suave and stuff, which is it's okay. If I really wanted to change it, I would put the accent on it, but I don't know what the legal, hoops I have to, and I'm not going to do that. But yeah, sauve.
Okay, so the accent got lost somewhere, like paperwork wise.
No, just somewhere down the line, I guess people lost interest in it or something. Who knows?
Okay, right on. Sauve. Excellent. I speak customer service French, so I was wondering because I heard people say suave, but then I was like, wait, but is it Quebecois?
Yeah, I mean, I speak French Canadian. I don't actually speak much French, but if I do, it's like bon oui. It's not like the romantic. It's like Jacques Renault in Twin Peaks or something. Not good association.
Yeah, it's real different. French, Quebec French. Yeah, I'm really stoked everyone is here though. Yeah, how's it going with people's submissions? And yeah, how are people outside of the submissions as well?
I think that's a good question. Like I think like I'm afraid to complete tasks. Because I feel like I'm afraid to be abandoned. It's just like TV shows. I don't like to finish TV shows. I don't like to finish books. I don't like to finish movies. Because I feel like once I'm done, then it's just me all over again. And I don't like being just me. And I think it's like a similar thing with projects. Because over the past month, I've started more new things than I've managed to finish. And that's not good because like we need to get done. Like there is an end product that we're hoping to produce to get out to the world. So like, I guess I need to find a way to get over whatever that is that's kind of keeping me from finishing my work. But I'm like fully aware that there are other people that are totally comfortable doing all this and they just like knock shit out of the park. Daniel Garner is a person I'm aware of who like just is like bing bang boom, I'm done, here you go. And it makes me feel silly, and it makes me almost question what I'm doing here in the first place. But like yeah, no, I don't know. How are you, Mike?
I'm good. I mean, I can relate to some of what you're saying because, like, I write a lot. I sometimes write like 12 hours a day, so it's kind of ridiculous. And yet, it still takes me like just as much time to write anything as it does to write like the best thing I can write. So it really is a matter of trying to put that energy into what you care about. But then I've been working on this one book for like 5 years, so I have to get away from that, or else you just feel like you're literally digging this, like the artificial hole they're digging in Heart of Darkness. That's how I feel. But I also relate to the part about starting the new things. Like, even right before like the TuCon presentation, I was like, I have an idea for a monograph. I should put all of my time into that right now, and so that's also very relatable. But yeah, I'm not as much with this submission because I think what I'm submitting is pretty much like finished and has been for a while. But just in general, I feel like, yeah, a lot. I've taken on a lot, and now I'm facing the consequences. But it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One is I wonder what Daniel Garner's internal experience is, right?
Yeah.
Because from the outside, right, it could be like, oh yeah, like, but I wonder because like I feel like I know when something's done when I like absolutely hate it and I just never want to look at it again. And it can take me a long time. And it's not like like I think it's really bad, but it's just like I guess the obsessive nature of editing, like you get to this point where it's like there's nothing more that can be done. Like I don't even know what these words mean anymore, and so that'll have to do. But yeah, I think I was talking to a friend yesterday about sort of the like trying to like I don't know, almost like leverage your procrastination or something like that. Cause like the only reason I'm writing, well, that's not true. I was going to say the only reason I'm writing the Theory Underground paper is because I'm supposed to be writing the second draft of my memoir, which is mostly true, but I have other reasons too. But and then last week I found myself just like totally revamping my CV for no reason, only because I was supposed to be working on the paper because I was supposed to be working on the memoir. So it's like, but I don't know, it's kind of fun sometimes to like dedicate different chunks of time to different projects in a way that it's like right now, the thing I want to work on the most, I'm not allowed to until I get this second draft done. So by the time I get to it, I'm gonna have like this rush of energy for it. I don't know if this is like a sustainable way to work, but it kind of works.
Yeah, I can relate to some of that where it's like you want to have ideally maybe 2 or 3 things going so that no one starts to feel too much like a slog, and then sometimes reward yourself with a really flaky artistic rewarding thing, and then other times you're writing CSS style sheets for some reason, even though that's not what you want to do. And so yeah, a balance. You want to do, if you just sit there writing your poetry or whatever, you can start to be kind of like that person that is the poet writing on their bar napkin and calling themselves, so you want to do the practical things to get your work out in front of people and build things that are accessible, and then you also want to feed the creative muse or whatever.
Dude, I started writing poetry this week too. Because
Just
I was like, no.
Poesy.
Yeah,
Wow.
Yeah, productive procrastination. Always having a smorgasbord of shit to do so that when you inevitably put it off, when you put off the one thing, you're still accomplishing something. I think that, like, for me, that's been a life changer. And I learned that, I think, from Dave, or like maybe explicitly kind of like concretized that idea through working with Dave. Like feeling listless and useless and even worthless. That's like I don't know. It's a complex thing. It's not easily solved, right? But you, as the kind of person dealing with those feelings, you can address it by hacking your kind of daily life, your daily situation. So it's not the case that you have something worth doing and video games. Like, so it's never that choice. It's never ice cream and like life's work. It's like, it's always something important to you. So I do like, I was being silly. I do like the fact that I'm always starting new things. Feels good. It's edifying. It's gratifying. It's validating. Although, I mean, it would be nice to. Dave and I were just talking about like missing video games. Like, I don't know. I think there's a way to build that back into a structure too. It's just maybe a delicate balance. But yeah, dude, I'd rather read fucking Being in Time than play Baldur's Gate. I don't know, maybe. And
you get the audio book and you just put it all together. There you go.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, yeah, but also you can't do it that way, dude. It's like you can't go deep enough. And you are getting ready to like dive deeply into this editing process. Are you ready?
Nope. But it's gonna happen one way or the other, and that's just how deadlines work in my life. I'm definitely excited to like get into this. I think after having edited Underground Theory a couple years ago, I really know what worked, what didn't, how long it would take. I really don't mind. Like, I'm the type of person who genuinely enjoys the sitting down and like the formatting and that type of work. Kind of, I don't know, like logistic, analytic brained person. I can sit and organize and put things into files. Excuse me. So it'll be good. I don't actually know like the timeline, so we'll have a year or even two for some of these based on the amount of submissions we get for certain volumes. So it'll definitely be a process, and I think we have some more like volunteer readers this time around, because last time I was like the like proofreader, but also doing a read through and giving just suggestions of like, hey, I think this sentence got cut off here and you meant this, or hey, did you actually mean this, or hey, this sentence doesn't make sense. And most people were like, oh, great, thanks, I'll fix that. But then there were a couple times where it was like, well, maybe Anne doesn't know what she's talking about. And I'm like, oh, I don't appreciate that. Okay. So, because I'm kind of at the relationship in my own writing where I've been so schooled that I have a really good sense for grammar and sentence structure and writing in that way, which is what makes this work easy for me. But it's like the actual writing part and the creative process part that I am still like a baby at, more or less, as I'm kind of on my way out of the university and the institutions. Like, just over the last 6 months, I've started a folder in my Google Drive that's just like writing and stuff. And every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be poetic, or I'm going to write something. And so I'm like at, close to the stage where it'll start pouring out of me, and then I'll have things to productively procrastinate on. But for now, the like editing part of it and the actual behind the scenes logistics, getting everything into place, like I find meaningful. I think the like theater creative brain, that side of me, like making something from nothing, is cool and exciting. So yeah, I think it'll be a better process this time around, just having some hands, some other readers, knowing what the heck to do, being familiar with Word and how to format a book. Because the first time was like even just relearning the newest version of Microsoft Word and how do I format blah blah blah. So yeah, it'll be good. It will be good.
I think
I was curious, and how substantive do you kind of plan to get with your edits? And I imagine it will like vary a lot piece to piece. But I guess hearing that some of these anthologies like might have a longer timeline made me curious. Yeah, what you would say about that. And we're getting a bit of feedback. So if anyone has headphones they could pop in, that might help. And also, hi, Tyler. Nice to see you.
Yeah, in terms of the editing process, I think part of what makes Theory Underground is that we're not a professional publishing house. We're kind of like, okay, you've got ideas, you've got a piece, we're gonna try to get it out there like as soon as possible realistically. And so that means there's not going to be like rounds and rounds of edits. Like really there will probably be at least 2 people like just kind of doing a read over of the piece. And yeah, just catching things that like seem like they were mistakes or seem like, because sometimes when we read our own work over and over, we know what we're saying, but then it's like, oh, you left out the word the right here when it obviously goes there. And yeah, it really just does depend on kind of the piece at hand and the scope of the piece. But the plan is not to get bogged down in editing. It's really just kind of a like, and you don't even have to, as the writer, you don't have to like accept a single thing we say. It's just kind of a more, hey, here's some outside eyes. Here's maybe an error I caught. Here's maybe a sentence that for me felt confusing or wordy, but like we didn't really do that much editing. It was just kind of more a proofread, and like out of the kindness of our heart, we're like, hey, this sentence could maybe be worded differently to make more sense, but you do you, like author. And so I think that'll be the same thing around this time. The deadline is so close. I was gonna say if people want, further reading, but like we're past that point now, I suppose. But just some like basic, people who have their eyes on it will be catching things that don't make sense. And then like the last couple times I've edited like theory or time energy or underground theory, I think I was a lot more concerned with like standardization of different grammatical choices or like Oxford comma versus not, because that was a me thing. But this time around it's like stylistically I'm not going to change anything. Like we didn't change up because we got submissions from people who live in Europe, and so some of their word spelling was different, and we didn't change that. There were a couple times where I was like, I'm making this an Oxford comma because I'm stubborn like that, but I'm not going to do so much of that this time around. So stylistically, however people choose to format and like what their grammar knowledge and all of that punctuation is, like it'll be what it is. So we're just checking for any last minute like, oh, that seems like it was a mistake.
Sure.
Yeah. Look, we have a Dave.
Dave, do you want to shout out once again getting people involved in being volunteer readers over the next weeks?
So that's great. Thanks. Yeah. So I dropped a voice memo about this into the Discord, and I also sent out an email. People on the email list were presenters at TUCon. There's other people who will be interested in reading these pieces and providing feedback and being a part of that whole review process. And so these are not workshops. We're not interested in you changing what you're saying. We're just interested in being able to understand you, and that you are understood. And that's the point. It's like it's totally semantic, not aesthetic. because I don't care about whether we agree with you or whether you could have opened it up better with a nice metaphor. We don't care about that. We just care, like, does what you're saying make sense? Can we actually assume your position? Does it actually relate to the things that you're talking about? And then it's like, cool, fucking based. And I thought maybe we should actually read. I want Nance to read it, maybe, and we don't have to immediately. I do want to say a couple other things first, but I think I caught up. I listened to everything so far, and so I do want to say some stuff about that. But the publisher's statement is, I think, a good grounding here. It goes hand in hand with this, you know, what we're so productive. We're so what was the productive procrastination? We're also good at this up against deadlines. And that's kind of the point, is like the goal is that you end up doing like way more cool shit than you would have, because you want, and it's not about like, oh, look, at Fury Underground, this is what is going on, so much as like, between us all, this is the conversation that we are having. It is a lot more supposed to be that, and then people can be voyeuristic and read along. This is a lot more like a print forum than an academic journal, you know? Of course, there's still like a great degree of like respect and recognition that we all have for anything here, you know, and more so though is the point.
Right. So like, even though we're not aiming for like, this is some prestigious academic anthology, it's like with Underground Theory, I took the actual like editing and formatting and making it look nice and standardized. Like, I took that very, very seriously. And then Samuel Longcar was like, this is the best edited anthology I've ever seen. And I think it was partly like Dave's putting it together, but then it's like, I really did, like, formatting wise, I try to make it look pretty nice. And I will do that again for all of the anthologies. And so it'll still be a product that, like, something that if you're in one of the volumes, like, you'll be proud to show your parents and go, look at this, like, nice book. Yes, it was published via Amazon KDP, and we're not ashamed of that because we're using the resources available to us right now. But it'll look like a legit book.
It will be the most legit book.
The most legit book that's ever been.
The most legit
be
book in the
huge.
world.
Gonna be so good. Best.
Bigly. No, it's super sick. I've given several copies away. I kept my proof copy, and the other like proper copies that I got, I gave them to family members and shit, because the proof copy to me is, you know, a little more meaningful, but and it has some of those things that were edited out in later runs, but it is nice. It is like, there's something to the fact that, like, look, I wrote a blog on the internet for fucking years, and it started out, it was like graffiti and punk rock and dumb bullshit. And yeah, like, there's something to being able to like maintain a worthwhile, valuable line of communication on the internet. But there's something different when you are curated by a group of people that you respect, that you trust, and you are like symbolically welcomed into the conversation. So it felt fucking great to give that shit away to my brother and shit.
I said yikes, and I don't know about all of that. To some extent, I don't know what I don't know that we all have to trust each other. We're in post-trust times,
no, look,
you know.
Okay. The type of trust I'm talking is that, like, I'm talking to you rather than the dudes I ride skateboards with. Like, I don't trust that they have, like, we can sit around and talk about, whoa, man, wouldn't it be cool if we were all like God particles? But like, I trust that the level of conversation is a little more rigorous here. That kind of trust.
So basically, it's a kind of it's an intellectual integrity that we trust in.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I also like you all. I think, you know, I've got good impressions of you all so far, you know, but there's also like at the level of it's like peer review is an interesting thing, because it's like it is the idea of the general peer, and we're not doing that. it's instead of the general peer, it's like actually you all. And so yeah, the whole feedback process will be kind of less of a workshop and more of a, are we following each other? Are we able to understand? Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyler Murray, what's cracking, homie? It's good to see you, man. How are you? What do you want to say? Oh, and a wild Daniel just appeared as well. But Tyler,
hey Daniel, I'm gonna run upstairs and finish setting up the computer so I can join you all from up there. But I'll be listening from the live side. See you all soon.
Bye bye.
How's all the beautiful people doing? Good to see everyone.
Great to see you, Daniel. I love you, man. Hey, thank you for what you said to me earlier, man. I appreciate that.
Of course, I thought that was magnificent, and I agree that the wee hours have a special quality of world. That's my favorite time as well. But not to interrupt, I just wanted to say hi to everyone.
Tyler, what's up, man? What's on your mind? How are you? It's been a while since we've seen you, but it is good to see you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for putting this together. I guess, yeah, I need to pull back open my my essay that I have been working on. When I came to TUCon, I kind of, in the days before that, I sort of rewrote what I ended up sharing, because it felt like when I went in to read the essay that I'd been kind of working on throughout the summer, it just felt stale and not something that, from a verbal and like a live presentation standpoint, that I would want, or that it didn't feel like that was going to work very well to present like from that document. But now, after presenting it to UConn, I think there will be a little bit of a mix between where I feel like at TUConn I kind of was trying to speak from the heart, and then now I want to go back and read this kind of more polished piece from the summer and see if I can make it, I don't know, just more accessible to, especially like earlier in the summer I shared it with my dad, and it was kind of I don't know, it didn't feel like it landed very well with him, because it was just a lot of kind of inside baseball. So I guess I want to go back in these last couple days before the deadline and see if I can bring in that speaking from the heart element and put it back into the more rigorous academic piece that I have. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I've been just having to work on art and my, just work to pay the bills. So I haven't really been thinking about a lot of this stuff lately. But seeing that you guys were going to have this, I thought, I should just pop in and maybe this will fire me up to get working on it in the next couple of days. So I don't know. I'd be curious where Nance, Kier, Mike, Daniel, where are you guys at with all of this? Maybe you already said, but I came in 20 minutes late.
I quit. This is my retirement party. I'm gonna go live under a bridge. And everyone else is doing fantabulous.
Yeah, I have sort of some like questions for Anne, because I'm submitting fiction. I don't know, maybe we should put that aside for later for a more like logistical part of the evening.
I'm gonna.
I'm down for a question unless we want to do something else.
Okay, if there are no takers, so yeah, like I don't know if you read the abstracts, like I submitted the piece that I did read at TUCon, but then I also submitted some theory fiction that for the human futures, and it's something I'd written before. It was something I was using for like grant applications, so it was pretty polished going in, and it already really was pretty like Nick Land focused, and so it was really just a matter of kind of putting a little bit more of that in, putting a little bit from Mikey's course in. But I was just wondering, like, the parameters of, should I be doing anything differently since it is fiction and probably there might be limited fiction submissions, or is there something that would be a non-starter, or just anything I should know?
I wouldn't really think like fiction would be all that different. In Underground Theory, we had a couple of more creative submissions that were not just standard like paragraphs with indents. And so that is something where if like a fiction piece needs to be styled differently, or if it looks a little bit different than just standard, like I said, like big block paragraphs, we can totally fit the style. Like whatever, we're super open to, excuse me, I'm gonna cough. Yeah, if something's a little bit more artistically stylized, but I don't think there's anything, unless Dave, if you can think of something for fiction, we'll make it work no matter what.
We'll have to read over everything first before we. Right now, just make sure the ideas get across, and then we'll read over and get back to you. And I wanted to say one thing about the sort of phases we're going through. I can't, my camera's all scrunched up, and so I'm trying to figure out how to fix this. But
go to properties.
Yeah. Go to properties, video settings.
Yep. Resolution.
Where is it? What is it? Didn't mean to hijack this with my troubleshooting.
This is what we do, man. This
original ratio? No, not that.
Part of the process.
Okay. Whatever. I'm going to set up OBS virtual camera anyway. Don't worry about me. Folks, I'll be right back. But I just wanted to say, like, the main thing is we'll talk about the phases and everything like that, but let's do the publisher statement soon, and then I'll be ready to go.
Here, I'll do that right now. We'll read the Theory Underground publisher statement, and then we'll keep it moving. Few of us have anything in common these days outside of a common knowledge that there is no future in existing institutions, movements, or the ideologies that rationalize them. Never before has it been so important that we think and interrogate the situation we are in anew. Nobody has the answer, yet there is this idea that if you say the wrong thing, you might have to live with it the rest of your life, or that it could obstruct your opportunities for upward mobility. Professors, activists, and media personalities feel this pressure every day, but so do regular workers who are, for all practical purposes, barred from public life anyway. This culture of fear and silencing stultifies thought and discourse, leading to a genocide of voice, plurality, and the utter negation of dialectics. People who don't even go on social media at all, ever, live under a virtual specter that haunts and regulates their discourse. How do we lift the fetters that obstruct a cultural unfolding? Not by playing into the overly neurotic self-censorship or fear of guilt by association, not by overthinking what we say, not by apologizing when others choose to interpret our statements in the least charitable light, and definitely not by holding our writings up to a standard so high that it holds us back from engaging with language, the world, and others around us in new ways. We don't have the time, energy, or budget for perfection. In the same way that rock music in the 1970s was already co-opted and overproduced for mass consumption, thus leading to an explosion of underground music, so publishing today has become sterile and scripted. In English classes, or whatever language was native in your upbringing, we are taught form over substance, grammar over ideas, definitions instead of concepts. In the same way that such a great percentage of the population is schooled to hate mathematics, a perhaps proportionate percentage of us learn to fear writing. We're too worried that others will spot a mistake. This is why, in theory circles, people keep their cards hidden, alluding to what one knows rather than putting the cards out on the table and trying to genuinely think and dialogue with others. This is the opposite of language learning spaces, where everyone knows they are always learning and that failure is part of the process of learning in any genuinely educational space. This is why Theory Underground puts its multilingualism social clubs front and center. By immersing ourselves in the deep end of other languages, Getting lost in the unknown and failing together, we accustom ourselves to the necessary conditions of learning itself. Trial and error can be fun once you realize you and everyone else is always already wrong in some way, especially if you realize there's nothing really to lose and people who matter are going to love you anyway, warts and all. Of course, this can be overdone. We don't want to waste precious time energy reading incoherent or half-baked thoughts thrown together in manic furies passing itself off as genius. That is why we still have a weekly writer's workshop component at the Theory Underground live hub events, but the emphasis is on substance, not form. Beyond the question of whether your point is getting across, we aim to hold ourselves to higher standards than the average state university. We try to model learning as a way of life, which requires becoming comfortable with failing and learning as you go. So, when your critical eye catches a spelling or grammar mistake, pride yourself in the fact that you are reading underground shit. In other words, real people with no institutional backing, learning how to think and communicate, not for upward mobility, profit, or fame, but because it matters as an end in itself. Yay! Applause, applause, applause. So that is a little.
Here we go.
A little old. There's some things in there
It's
that
a little old.
might confuse some people that are new.
Yeah.
But the spirit remains the same.
Yeah. No multilingualism, no weekly writers workshop. But here's the thing. The writers workshop framing was replaced by we read you. Like that's what we say. We read you. It's not a workshop. It's not a focus group. It's a we read you. And so the we read you is something rolling out, not beginning of 2025. It's rolling out because we're doing this here, this. And so this whole question of like the phases and the timelines and what's the process? Well, I mean, I'm not going to say we're making it up as we go. We already know how to do this. I know enough about how to do this to know I don't want to give everybody some thing that goes out over months and tells you all how it's going to go, because I'm not going to structure my life like that. And I don't think most of the rest of us are going to structure our lives like that. But we're going to be working with everybody on a 1 to 3 week basis, right? And so everyone's going to get their pieces into us by the 17th, right? We extended it a couple of days. Get to us by the 17th. And then from there, we're going to start getting back to people. And part of the getting back to people is saying, all right, so we're going to group you up with, X, Y, and Z people. Now, look, some people are just like Todd McGowan or Benjamin Studebaker, or Daniel Garner. They did it. They did it already. But also, at least a couple of those people might be interested in reading some of your work and being present for some of these conversations. I don't imagine that will happen with Todd McGowan because he is busier than he's ever been in his entire life. And it's actually terrible. He's not happy about it. He is a time energy believer, and he is more destitute in terms of time energy than he's been in the last decade. But, for those of us with the relative scole or otium, right, let's do it. And for some of us, we simply will not have the energy infused large repeatable blocks of time reliably between us. We won't have it. But by putting deadlines on something a week to 2 weeks out, you'll be able to make miracles happen. And so that's, this is all a machine to get us to do something we wouldn't have otherwise done. Right. And so we're trying to work with where everyone's at in terms of their availability. And so if you're super available, if you want to be on several of the groups for the We Read You, then let me know. And, maybe we should get a little form together where people can like put the days that work best for them, the hours, like, on an average week, I could commit, this kind of like afternoon time to doing a Zoom call. And I'll feel everybody out with some kind of a form. And then we'll proceed from there. But one of the big things is, I do want to do everyone's. And so I feel a little like, I'm not sure I don't, here's the thing is like the first phase of everyone reading each other, I don't have to be present for all of that. But the thing is let's just say whichever anthology is going to be first, and it's likely to be the Human Futures one, but it could be Theorizing the Underground. It's one of those two. Well, that's all of the pieces I'm going to be focusing on, right? I'm going to try to meet with everybody who's going to be in it over the course of a couple of weeks. And one of the things that I want to let everyone know about the Human Futures volume is, if you're in it, or if you're a part of the review, I don't like to say review, right? We're trying to, if you read it, if you're one of the readers, then you're going to have the opportunity to do an additional submission of 500 to 1,000 words, that riffs off of stuff that's already in there. So if you actually read it cover to cover, then you can add a piece that riffs off of stuff. And we might do some collaborative ones, like Nance and I might write a 900 word piece together. And then that will be under a pseudonym, and you'll all know who was on what, but the public won't know. So there is going to be like this, I'm not complete anonymity, and we're not trying to dissolve our identities or whatever.
We're just trying
But
to play.
there will be room. There will be room to play in the interstices, and that's all our little, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun. It's playful. But I mean, my piece will be under my name,
No, I actually really like that there might be some stuff that's somewhat anonymized. There's this book, I think it came out last year, called Self-Made, and it's like the history of self-making by this theologian, Tara Isabella Burton. And it talks about how like even the idea that artists should be named was not always the case in the Middle Ages. All art, I don't know if I can make such a declarative statement, but it was like very common for artists to work anonymously. And there was some case she talks about in the book in like the 1200s, and these two monks were like arguing over like whose piece of art this was. And the judge's decision was like, okay, it's neither of yours. Like this belongs to no one, this belongs to God, right? And so yeah, I think it's really interesting to experiment with like, yeah, what changes if your name isn't on something.
I think there's just sometimes when you'll say something, if you're using a character, that you wouldn't say otherwise, and that it's like something that you're like, well, I don't even necessarily hold to this, but it's something I want to objectify and then look at. And that's part of thinking, Kierkegaard was really big on this, but I also think there's like this sort of Deleuze-Guattarian sort of new left. Oh, the ego is the problem and it's authorship itself. And we need to kind of like, obviously D&G right under their names, but it's almost like they apologize for that. And then they do a lot to make it a little bit harder to know who's saying what, which is cool. Cool stuff comes from it. But, so I'm set up now. I'm officially here. So I wanted to say thank you for having me on the show. I'll shut up in a second, but I wanted to say, I'm really excited that you both put this together, Nance and Kier. It was a really good example of sovereign organizing. You just picked a time, you made it happen, and look at all the people who were able to come out for it. I wouldn't have been able to, but you forced it into my reality because I got excited about it. And it forced me to finish setting up my new computer here a lot faster. And it's a computer that Nance gifted me. And so thank you, Nance, for the new computer. I'm officially on it.
That's dope. You were in your living room on your old computer it was like 2 weeks, but it felt like 2 months, man. Time has been very odd of late. I don't know. And yeah, like I think that like for me, subjectively, recently, I've been all over the place. And I think it has been largely to do with this pressure that's coming up to like produce something that I think is worthy of the audience's time and attention. So like in this space, I did like 6 podcast episodes. I wrote a bunch of fucking bullshit, short stories, and like dumb, just half-ass hanky-panky bullshit. But I'm also like aware that most other people are like seriously focusing on their projects, and getting it done. So I'm excited. For that. The stuff I've read already is amazing. Really good. Really good. Daniel, I want to talk about your writing process, man. Or I guess talk about it. I want to ask you about it.
Kier had it put it in a question form earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel, you came up before you got here. Because I think Nance, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but it was something about how maybe it seems like Daniel just like easily like publishes stuff and it just keeps coming and everything. And I said like I was curious what Daniel's internal experience of that is, and does it feel as free and easy as it might look on the outside?
Well, goodness, I'm honored. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I agree with Dave. I really love the idea of the water cooler. It's super cool. And I think this is an example of using the medium and the space proper, where it's a coordination of people coming together, and it's just a really powerful thing. So I really like it. Oh, the writing process. Let me think. Well, you're ooze. I think it's really important that you write something that you really do believe has stakes. Like you're writing something because you believe like it has stakes to be known. Because if you believe that, then even if it's really hard or you don't know where to go, there's that incentive to push you to figure it out. Like if you're writing something that you merely think is interesting, like, oh, this is neat, that I don't find is something that tends to be what catches me. Usually if I find it neat, I write it into, I have lots and lots of dump documents, like thousands of pages of dump documents that are ordered. It's not just a dump, but it's interesting. I wouldn't call it stakes, it's interesting. 90% of ideas go to just the interesting pile, right? And actually, I think it's really important too that you're not looking to, this sounds very odd. I don't think you want to look to write something. Like you're not looking to write something. You should be looking to learn, and you should be looking to read, and you should be looking to meet people. And you should put yourself in a posture of openness. And I definitely think the posture of encountering the text, encountering the person, encountering the ideas is primary. And when one does that and does that regularly, one finds an emergence of something with stakes that then you find yourself writing because it has stakes. And I think that's important. Second, writing is rewriting. You should basically expect yourself to rewrite the work a lot. But that's not because it's wrong, but because it's a block of marble that you're making a statue out of. I think also you should, I think basically most papers I'll write and then basically sit on for like years. There will be lots of works like Belonging Again I wrote in 2016. Then I went back and said, no, I need to read these other books to kind of bring it together, and Belonging Again 2.1 or The Truest of the Rational. And I think there's also that part of it, because I think there are different stages. Like I think there's earlier, I think there's phases where you should be reading a whole lot. I think like reading, because writing has to emerge out of an internal space of things that are slamming together, that you can't plan to slam together, but because they're in you, they could come together, right? So there's a lot of reading, but there's also a lot of, this gets into things of how do you determine what you read? So for example, if Ivan Illich is talking about Peter Berger and Peter Berger is talking about Philip Reeve, then you should kind of follow the trajectory of the people that your people read and be like, well, if Peter Berger is talking about Philip Reeve, I should look at that. And that tends to create interconnections between things. So reading, I think also it kind of helps too, like, for example, if you write like 6 things at the same time. And the reason I say that is because honestly, it's easier to wake up and have inspiration for one of those works than like if you say, I'm going to write Ivan Illich tomorrow, That's much more unlikely than to have 6 papers and you wake up in tomorrow wanting to write one of those 6. And I think that's really important. So for example, like I was working on the coda to the map is indestructible. I'm getting the situation of capital refined because I want to add some sections out of a particular paper on Leibniz. I'm editing from Belonging Again 2.2. The final book of it is all about the social coordination, some poems, and we just put out Under the Wing. So also critically, I think you want to have different genres. I like having different genres of work. So you have a fiction, you have a poetry, you have nonfiction in different types, because some days you kind of wake up with different styles. And, you know, it's kind of like Nassim Taleb makes the point in Black Swan where he said, and just to repeat the point, he said, if you go into Manhattan, the chances of you meeting a particular person you know is very low. But the chances of meeting someone you know is actually quite high, right? As long as you don't specify it. So likewise, if you have multiple things you're working on, the chances that you can have inspiration to work on one of those 6 is much higher than forcing yourself to work on one of them, right? And having a certain movement between those different things. And they all have stakes. I mean, there are little things too. Like I don't eat when I'm like, I find once I eat, all the blood goes to the stomach and I can't think. I find the morning is the best time to do it. I find basically also stuff like wearing the same shirt, because your body associates putting that shirt on with writing, I think is quite helpful. I think creating in the morning, manual labor midday, and editing in the evening is generally good. I think the brain goes from right brain to left through time. I think you can take the 10-minute lay down trick that can bring up, you know, another 2 hours of right brain in the afternoon. You can do Walker Percy would follow that. I generally see that. When you look at the sleep schedules, I think your sleep schedule and your intentionality about creating a meta architecture that tends to incubate writing is really important. And you'll notice like a lot of people have different sleep schedules. Like it tends to be morning. That's quite important when they'll do different works. I'm just talking now. I hope I'm not talking too much. So I was just, it's a wonderful question.
No, please,
like,
please go on. This is amazing.
You're very kind. So morning seems to be very important. The other thing I would say, so morning you'll see with people, they don't eat so much. Eating seems to turn off your brain. Now, I don't want to universalize that because I think it depends on the speed of your metabolism. I think it also can vary between genders. So there's some different things there. But there is something about eating food. Let me put it this way. I learned this from an Olympic wrestler, and I thought it was really very interesting. He was making the point, because I wrestled for a bunch of years, he was making the point that one of the reasons people are sleepy after they eat is because they don't chew enough times. And he said you should chew 20 times before you swallow. I've actually found that's really useful, because when you chew a lot before you swallow, your brain is able to digest the food quicker and you can enter into energy faster. And I always really like that. And apparently that's really good as well, is really good as well for basically like health, actually, is that people don't chew enough. I think that's quite true. And that seems to help you break down things. Well, there you go. And so I find that's very useful. I definitely think, I definitely believe strongly and consolidating your communication. So, for example, I don't have a smartphone. The reason I don't have a smartphone is because even if no one is pinging me, the very knowledge that someone could ping me is enough to actually take you out of focus, right? And so, like, one of the things I think is I'm not, like, I try to centralize to email. I do have like Facebook for social messaging, but I don't have a cell phone. Now I have a business phone. I have a flip phone for work calls, right? But you can't really text. I really can't take pictures. And the reason for that is because even just the knowledge that you could call someone or that you could be contacted will fragment your brain, right? Now, if you have a smartphone, I'm not anti-smartphone. What I would say definitely is treat it like it's a wall phone. You know, when in the 90s we had phones on the wall, take your cell phone and put it on a particular shelf in your bedroom and only use it there. Make yourself have to walk to that shelf to use it. And just by having a little bit of an architectural nudge, like the book Nudge talks about, that alone will help numb the worry about being pinged. Precisely because you can't just, because here's the other thing, your life, you tend to lose a lot of your time by little 2 minutes here and there. You don't lose a lot of time because you, for 3 hours, were on your cell phone. You lose a lot of your time because you do 52-minute glances, right? But you see, because it's all 2-minute glances, you actually don't notice how much time it is because it always feels quick, right? So that's the perniciousness of these technologies, is that it doesn't feel like you spend a lot of time on it because the times you do tend to be quick, and therefore it never feels expensive. But when you add it all up, then you actually lose a lot. And then more critically, you fragment your focus. And once you fragment your focus, that becomes very problematic. Also, too, technologies are an infinite game. You know how you have the call-out finite game and an infinite game, right? I think an infinite game is a game that you keep playing. A finite game has a beginning and end, right? Be incredibly intentional about what infinite games you choose to play. Incredibly intentional. And ask yourself, is this infinite game I'm playing actually constructive or not? And the issue is, texting is an infinite game, actually. You could always send another text. You could always receive another text. You can always check another video, and et cetera, so forth, right? So you have to, but then precisely these technologies allow communication and exposure that otherwise was not possible, right? So the question is, how do you use the infinite game from getting a logic of its own that carries you away like a game theory thing, but it's serving you, right? So by taking the phone and having it in an architectural location, that's important. I think other things, like you can have an infinite, like, and I think this is all important because the reason I say it, because writing is a reflection of the mental state you design throughout the day. It's not just where you are, it's what you've made yourself throughout the sum of your habits as you're going through, right? And so when you think of yourself, how do I do emails? Because as I'm doing emails, I'm creating habits of how I think that will actually impact how I'm able to write, right? So how am I reading? Like, how am I doing work? Like another thing, like for me, I always wanted to do blue collar jobs because I wanted to have control over my brain. Like when I was choosing, like unloading trucks in 2014, you know, like chairs and different things. Because to me, it's like if you're gonna work for if you're gonna work for someone to pay for your body, that's different from working for someone to also get your brain, right? Those are very, 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 very different payments, right? And if you pay for your brain, you also may be giving over your ability to form the kind of habits you want to have that you bring into a writing space, right? Because you're giving over your mental capacity in your space, right? So you always kind of ask yourself, does this job I'm taking run the risk of training me into habits that are going to get in the way of my ability to enter into the writing focus? If yes, then don't do it. If no, go right ahead. Likewise, is the time, is eating. I always was taken, like Jonathan Edwards would literally keep a log of the things he would eat and how he felt afterwards in order to get a sense of what foods affected his energy, and he would form his diet around that so that he could write better, right? So that he could think better, right? Like literally pay attention to the kind of foods you eat and the impact on your energy they have afterwards, right? Because that actually is a little secret as well. What times of day do things go? Yeah, everything you do, you have to ask, how is this shaping the kind of mind I have that I bring into every moment of every day, right? And so for me, that meant not having a smartphone, but having something more like email because it's very centralized. And critically, the way I do it in the morning is I open the email for about, first thing actually, I open the email for about 5 minutes to make sure there's no emergencies, no work emergencies. If there are no emergencies, I then close the email and don't look at it for as long as possible, right? Like an hour or two or whatever, right? Because that's if you don't check the email at all, and there is an emergency work email, then you could get in trouble. But once you've checked it and you see there are no emergencies, well, then don't be checking it every 5 minutes because there's a little paranoid tick that you could be missing something, right? So those are important. I mean, the other things, I'm just going on. The other thing I would say is I like to read, so for example, with Belonging Again, I knew enough about Philip Reeve, Peter Berger, Hunter, and Conyers to stack all those books together and say, when I do this project, I'm going to be reading those people, actually. And because I kind of had a sense that there was enough similarity, then there was a sense of creative insight that possibly could emerge from them in the cross-pollination of them, right? And I really think when you're working on a project, you want to restrict your reading to that project, actually. Because if you don't, you'll read something interesting and want to do something different. Like as you're reading, you're like, whoa, and you're now off track and you've got a million things you don't finish. So I like, for example, have a stack over in that closet of books for reconstructing A as A that I'm forcing myself not to read until that book, because once I read those books, I know it's going to activate the parts of my brain that are going to be doing that argument, right? So I like to cluster books together from when I have a sense of what project they will be for. And then the books I'm reading is an ecosystem of cross-pollination, interactions, and encounters that make possible something emerge that otherwise could not emerge. And that's then, because also when you're like, what am I going to write next? Like, writer's block, I think the best way to deal with writer's block is interconnected reading, like reading where books are cross-associating. Like read things that have cross association, because then when you do that, you're not just reading the text and learning the text, you're also creating a kind of imaginative space of creative encounters where things can come out of. And I think that's very important. And I'll stop there. Those are some thoughts that I guess were just coming to mind.
I love that. Okay, I want to jump off a couple things here.
Please.
One thing is I loved I don't know, discipline and focus came to mind as you were talking. And I think that those are things that I'm working on, especially, yeah, hearing you talk about like, I don't know, how you're communicating, how you're consuming information is shaping your habits. And, I like track over the last maybe 5 years, I've tracked the books I've read. I don't know if I finished like a single book this year because I'm like all over the place. And it's like there's something enjoyable about that, but it also reflects why the pieces I write are so short and lacking depth, right? Because I'm not like focusing enough and exercising enough discipline to go deeper. And I think that even came up in writing this paper, right? It's like I'm like citing these different books that I love. And if I'd planned it out better, I would have reread them all so that there would be like a depth to the citations. Whereas like, I have read them, so I know that I'm not like fully cherry picking, but it doesn't feel like the same level of quality to be like, okay, like which line from this book can I use to like strengthen my argument, when what I actually kind of want to do is to be in like earnest discourse with these various people that I'm reading. The other thing I wanted to mention was I love that you brought up manual labor in the afternoons. And I had a week of like way too much screen time and like just to the point of like wanting to run away. And yeah, today I just did a bunch of just physical stuff, getting ready for a trip to a cabin and like blah, 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 making sure I have what I need in the car. And I just think that that time is really valuable. And I love that like Benjamin Studebaker's talk on the idea of the monastery really talked about like the various practices that monks would do in order to really kind of strengthen their minds and their abilities to think and to reflect. And manual labor came up there too, And I think like, I guess for me, I've recognized that a type of procrastination that I enjoy is just information, right? Constant reading, constant podcast listening, like never giving myself a moment. And actually, it is when I'm like either doing physical labor or exercising without a podcast in my ear, things like percolate and collide and congeal.
Yes.
So I think that that's just really valuable.
Well, and not to, like, there is absolutely you would say, well, what, I'm listening to podcasts, I'm reading, isn't that good? Isn't I'm learning? Well, actually, it can be a constant, endless thing, right? Like, so for that as well, like in the same way, I bracket books. Like if I see episodes, like, oh, that looks really interesting and that really interesting. Well, it's all saved in a Word document, the links to the podcast to when I get to that project to listen to those things. I also think generally as a good rule, anything you listen to, force yourself to write something about. Because if you do that, you will actually consume in a proper way, not too much, I find. And you also become more thoughtful what you listen to. Like, so for example, one of the most, like well, we all know. I mean, like, one of the worst consuming is actually like the news. Why? Because the news, the design of the news is not for you to go and write something, but for you to keep listening, right? So the design of the news is actually to have, well, basically like people in their 60s who have it on as a fireplace all day, right? But the news, the 24/7 newscast was always like that, right? Well, there are actually podcasts that are increasingly following a kind of model that is to have you keep listening all the time, right? Not really actually expecting you to go and create something out of it. Well, that's a dangerous infinite game. That feels like you're learning, but you're actually not internalizing it into your subjectivity and your character to actually, well, be what you've learned. And so by having some sort of creative requirement on yourself to respond to whatever you listen to, that greatly increases the probability of internalization. So I think that's very important. There are other things too, like, I think it's important, like, a lot of times when you write, one of the things, like, if you write about Hegel or something, you might go, oh, am I getting the interpretation of Hegel correct? Am I correct? Right? I think this is a very dangerous thing, because even if you were correct, you couldn't know it because Hegel's dead. So even if you succeeded in actually accurately portraying Hegel's thought, it is a girdle point. It is an incompleteness. Instead, ask yourself, am I doing my complete best, as far as I know, with great self-skepticism to be genuine to the text? And am I trying to be on what Hegel was on, is how I think about it. Austin Farrer had this lovely line where he said, the only way you understand Tolstoy is to understand that the genius was in the fingertips. The genius is in the fingertips, that they know not what they do, and yet they know it as they do it. I think we've all had the experiences of feeling out an idea, and then it is there, right? Well, many of the great minds in history were no different. Do you really think that Aquinas had the entire project in his mind from the very beginning? He had notions and ideas, but he's also on a certain spirit, if you will, just like Hegel, and he's feeling it out. When you write, are you in that spirit? If you are in that spirit, then you actually have more fidelity to Hegel than an effort to get Hegel correct. Because when Hegel's writing, Hegel is not trying to get Hegel correct. He's trying to articulate something that he believes matters, that he's working hard to bring into existence, that he believes that the world without will be sorry for it. Is that the spirit of your writing? Because if that's the spirit that you're in, then you're in the same spirit as the great thinkers were, which in of itself actually, in my opinion, greatly increases the probability that you will accurately represent them. Maybe not, but if you're worried about that all the time, you just come out and say that. It's like, this could be, I always loved Harold Bloom. You know, Harold Bloom is basically like, you know, the history of literature is a history of really good misreadings. And he's true. He shows how many literary writers basically misread people, but that's actually the secret to their genius, right? One of the most liberating things was actually following the work of Harold Bloom and realizing that some of the greatest creative ideas in literature and philosophy were thanks to strong misreadings. Well, wait a minute, Bloom. If misreadings can be a good thing, why am I so worried about misreadings? Now, obviously, Bloom is not encouraging you to intentionally misrepresent, but what he's saying is to wrestle. Well, I think what Bloom actually, with his book on the Cabal, he's like, we need to think about writing as the Israelites. Like, it's wrestling with God. It's wrestling with the text. Like, Judaism, in a lot of Harold Bloom's thinking, as this continual conversation and wrestling and re-wrestling with the text, is actually the key modality by which to operate, right? When you write when you write on a thinker, you must always think about writing as a commitment for a lifelong wrestling with that thinker. And that actually, in raising the stakes of your relationship with it, you're not just going to write one paper on Hegel, publish it, and then never read Hegel again. When you sit down to write on a thinker, I think about it as a kind of commitment to the wrestling with this thinker for a lifetime. And when you do that, then the paper you're writing is a round in the wrestling match that you want to get right, because if you don't, you misunderstand the moves and you'll get bested. But you're also keeping in mind that it's a continual fight and you need to keep your mind in the zone. And it's a fight with real stakes, because we need to figure out what these thinkers were on so that we ourselves can get on it and change the conditions of possibility of the current moment. So I don't really believe, like, again, I love when Austin Farrer is like, what was, Tolstoy, the genius is in the fingertips. And the other way I have always thought about it, because I think so much writing is inhibited by the, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong, right? Okay, so how do you overcome that? Well, stakes and stuff. But another thing, like, do we really think that when David Hume is writing the treatise on human nature, he's going, oh boy, one day people are going to write PhD theses on this. I can't wait. There's going to be so many PhD theses about this. No, he is not writing his book because there's going to be an academic industry where people are going to get freaking PhDs on the treatise of Hume. He's writing his book because he believes people's lives need it. He thinks that there's something in the world that actually can be articulated in this text that matters. Maybe he's wrong, maybe he's delusional, but I promise you his motivation is not to get publication for PhD theses. I'm not saying he'd mind it, but there's a notion of a certain sort of like, well, for him, he believes that philosophical consciousness has been unleashed from common life, which is unleashing philosophical melancholia that will lead to totalization and total war. That's ultimately, and he predicted it very well. Now, I'd have to make that argument, but he believes the stake is the unleashing of philosophical melancholia, which basically is the meaning crisis, but it's long ago and it would lead to the total nation state and so on and so forth. He believes this is really important because he does think that once society can totalize, well, then you have totalized power and basically who knows what totalized power will do to the average man. So he's writing this book to show the limits of philosophical thought for the sake of philosophy being in service of the human being versus the professional apparatus or the king or the nation, the apparatus at the expense of the human, right? But he believes in this, right? So likewise, when you go to write, are you in that same spirit? Look at yourself and know, am I in that same spirit? And if you are, then do your very, very best to stay in that spirit. And all I have ever found is worrying about, am I getting this right? What if I'm right? All that does is like make you look down and sink in the water, kind of like Peter, right? Like all that ever does is freeze you up. I definitely also think like stuff like facing fears. Is there a fear in your life that you haven't faced? I think facing fear, like fears are the number one like subconscious block in your mind that you don't think have anything to do with your writing, but actually do, because much of writing is a result of a subconscious mind. Like your subconscious mind is almost more like basically when you go to write, you're creating a space in which your subconscious can come out and do magic. Like it's not just a conscious activity. Like you consciously create the conditions in which your subconscious has a space by which creativity can unfold, right? And it's not random because what's in your mind is relative to what you had the discipline and choice to put in it, right? But you had to put things in it so that they could come together into this space. So you're trying to design your life to condition it to create a space to where your subconscious can have these emergence, and then you have the conscious skill of the grammar and the editing to be able to process it properly, because if you can't process it properly, it becomes chaos. But that being the case, things like not facing fears, not doing things you know you should have done, but you haven't done, not dealing with personal traumas and difficulties, and of course, all of this is much more difficult than it is. These are actually part of the writing process. They don't seem like they are. They seem unrelated. What in the world is my facing the fear of telling that person in my life the thing I know now? What does that have to do with me writing about Hegel? Everything. Because that is precisely the block that is hindering the subconscious space from actually giving rise to the emergencies. You can do all of the writing disciplines you want. You can do all of the conditioning you want. But if you haven't faced those things inside of yourself that can allow these things to be released, which might be a 5-year process, it might be a difficult thing, but to see those as part of the process is important, because yeah, maybe it takes 10 years, but if you start now, you'll be further in 10 years than you would be if you don't. So I think seeing all of those as part of the picture is incredibly important. And for me, facing fears is actually a really important part of the writing process. And then I'll close with it. Because what is one of the main things that keep people from creating? Fear. Well, if you can't face fear in other areas of your life, why would you be able to face fear in this area of your life, right? Like it's all training the same sort of habit. So to me, all of those things are kind of interconnected.
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks, Daniel. It goes really well with the publisher statement, with the new post that went up on Substack today about writing to concrete others. Goes with the fuck it button post, which is about, just if there are, if you're torn between constipation and diarrhea, go with diarrhea. But like, I think that ties back to what you were saying about like, yeah, 80% of what you're writing is just going in that folder of like, yeah, it's interesting, but not so compelling that I want to keep doing stuff with it. Right. It's not important. It's not that important. Not yet. Maybe it'll turn into something.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I guess to that as well, like, let things go away. Like, don't, like, if there's an idea that can't stick in your mind, then it's probably not the one you should write on. Like something with stakes stays, you can't get rid of it. You find yourself that, like, one of the reasons you want to do manual labor without anything in your head is precisely to find the ideas that won't go away.
Yeah.
Like, you take a walk in the woods and it's just like haunting you. It's just there. You just find yourself thinking it. You're just in the idea again. That's what you should be writing on. And if you don't have processes by which to let ideas go away, then you actually are going to struggle to tell the difference between the ones that are merely interesting and the ones that are actually with stakes, right? Like, and that's actually another reason why conversation is so important, because what are the ideas that you just find yourself talking about, or that just kind of comes up? That's also an indication that that's what you need to, you just find yourself associating into it. Well, if you find yourself associating into it, that's a pretty good freaking test that's what you can write on, because it's just in you, right? You have to put yourself through tests to find the ideas that are just in you that won't shake off no matter what you do. And that's also really important. Because writing something that you can't shake off or that is just with you is very, well, natural because it's you. Whereas writing ideas that are just like, yeah, that sucks. It really sucks. So I definitely think the willingness to let ideas just go away is actually really, really important. And also, I will say this, a lot of those ideas, those thousands of ideas and story ideas and whatever that are interesting, what I find wild is 5 years later, you'll go, oh, that. And it like pops up. And you know where it is and you find it. And you write it down so that it's there for the, oh, yeah, that. There's a certain trust you have to have in your own life as a process, to where you look at it in an idea and say, wow, I think that's interesting, but it's not really sticking. And if I'm supposed to write about it, I'll just trust that in 5 years it will come back. And if it doesn't, the world didn't need it. That's also really, really, actually, that's really important. You must really, really be okay with the world not needing your writing, because that's how you can let ideas slip off. That's how you can let things flow with you. If you're like, oh my gosh, if people don't read, what if I never have a good idea again? What if, oh man, I got to get this out into the world. Well, then you have an attachment, right? And, obviously there are many, obviously that stress attachment. Well, there's the attachment that is a problem. There's actually a form of attachment in the creative life that's very problematic, where you're attached to ideas and you won't let them go off of you. But if you won't let them go off of you, then you have no test by which you can find the ones that are you. And the ones that are you are the ones that when you create the condition to unfold out of you, they will unfold out of you. And so works can come about. But again, that's going to mean, like, you've got to be willing to let things go. Like, you got to be willing to let things go. And the willingness to let things go is the process of letting emerge the things with which you can flow. And you just have to do that work to create the conditions of which that can occur. So I think that's important as well.
I can't help but think about this post-class fractured mass as you're talking about all this, Daniel. And there's a part of me that feels very called out by everything you've said. Like, I notice these tendencies in myself to retreat from fear. But I think I've become convinced that, like, the way to combat my fears, or the most effective way that I can combat my fears, is to address my own fragmented nature. And so it is, I guess, this, like, being critical, being aware of my immediate environment, my body, my embodiment. My body is something I also retreat from. like yesterday I got home from skateboarding and like I couldn't walk because I was just like going. And it wasn't because I was having fun. Sure, I was having fun, but there was also like a very large part of me that was like trying to destroy my body in a way. But it like trying to be healthier, like trying to be a complete human, a complete subject, a worthwhile human with something worthwhile to say. So we can reconnect, because like everybody is like, it is just like this cacophony of like everybody's saying, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, I feel entitled to this and I'm not getting that, I'm not getting these needs met, blah 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 blah. And we have like kind of post hoc structures that have sprung up in like ego psychology and like positivity and affirmative fucking, oh, you are so special, this and that, blah blah blah. But it's something that Dave has said a lot, taking like a moratorium and kind of critically suspending these things that I've allowed my identity to become invested in. I feel like that matters, man. And yeah, addressing fears. But it's easier. It's easier not to. It's easier to cuddle up and curl up and mope.
I will also say, like, another thing that I think is helpful to all of that is I don't like the space, theory underground, liminal web, social coordination. The work that we are doing is to have and I think you mentioned this, Nancy, it is to keep a conversation, it is to contribute to a conversing, contribute to an unfolding, not the making of content.
Yep.
The making of content is merely the byproduct of the contributing to a conversing, right? And the content is also necessary so people can see artifacts of the conversing to situate themselves in it and to be coordinated by it, right? The reason why that's very important is because there is not a virtue in simply writing a lot, and there's not a virtue in writing little. There's not a virtue in writing super complex work, and there's not a virtue in writing super simple work. Well, by what metric then do we determine what our writing should aim to do? Should we have 10,000 citations or no citations? Should we be writing for the man on the street or writing for the college professor? You can't win any of these games. The question you should ask is this contributing to the conversation? And is this contributing to keeping that alive and unfolding? The reason why I think that question is very important is because you stop thinking in terms of the hard, like all of the metrics that can make you insane. Not that metrics are bad, but you stop asking all of those questions. Your audience is the people participating in the unfolding of that conversation, right? And if you do that, then you're making friends as you write. You're creating a social life for yourself, and you're building something bigger than yourself that is not merely the creation of a platform so that you can be some sort of attentionless guru or something, right? If you do that and you genuinely believe the conversation is important, and you can look at your work, like what you should do is look at the paper you write or look at the work you're doing and saying, does that add to the conversation? Does it or does it not? And does it offer something that if somebody read it, they would be inspired to be in the conversation, or it would be an invitation into the conversation? If the work accomplishes this, great. Like, that's your heuristic, because otherwise one can say, oh, it's too complex, oh, it's too simple, oh, it's too long, oh, it's too short, or it's blah, 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 blah. If you see what we're doing online as the construction of a situation of the unfolding of that conversation, I think there's something very powerfully liberating about that, because then the act of creation is tied to a communal act. And there's a grace that comes for that, because then you'll be like, there's a grace that comes from that, because there's a double thing. You say, yeah, I can do better. But even though I can do better, it was still participating in that building, right? And I think that also can be inspiring when you see your creation and your writing as also tied to the creation of your friendships, your relationships, and social spaces. And you see that as the heuristic, that also helps you overcome a whole lot of writing blocks. That also helps you overcome a whole lot of content creation anxiety or different things like that. Like, that's how I think. I think about writing as what am I writing that is getting at things that need to be conversed about today to change the conditions of possibility in the socioeconomic political order? That's how I think the audience is the conversation in that sense. The audience is the unfolding of that conversation, and I find that also important to think for me personally.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I was gonna, I asked in the chat, and I figured I'd just repeat it here. But Mike, you indicated at the beginning of this stream, so it's no secret, but I already knew that you write a lot, and I'm just curious about how many points of similarity you feel here, and if there's any like big differences. Because in my experience, when I look at these articles about the different habits of different authors and stuff, they can be wildly different in various ways, but they're always so deliberate,
Well, a lot of what Daniel was saying did seem like I felt attacked in a different way because sometimes I am guilty of some of what he was mentioning. But yeah, I would say my process, I'm less involved in the conversation than I think I tend to. If you were to enumerate the points of, say, a novel of mine, they would not be anything all that profound or something that very very homespun wisdom or whatever. But for me, it's about building a sort of aesthetic nest or home for those things to live in, so that my somewhat simple idea can be sort of brought home again and refreshed and made you know alive again for people. And as for process, I couldn't agree more about not having food in your stomach. I think I would agree with that completely. um yeah, I don't know if there's, I would say another aspect is this might sound vain, but it's also it's really it's a self-deprecation more than anything. I've always had like delusional self-confidence, whereas like finish writing something, it's like, okay, lock up the awards, boys, it's over for this year, and the awards never come, and yet I managed to believe that every single time out. So there's obviously this like well documented idea that people that are very well read, they have this block where they don't start writing because they're holding themselves up against like Proust or whatever. Whereas yeah, I have the opposite problem. I believe in what I'm doing a little too much, and it's only with having been doing it for so long that I'm like, okay, this needs to like sit on a shelf for like a month before I can realize that it's actually quite mediocre. So yeah, I guess everyone is quite different in those regards, right? But I'm constantly getting this like sense of real accomplishment for stuff that I already know can't be that good based on my like experience. That anything I've just written, the way I'm feeling about it now is not how I'm going to feel in a month, and yet the process repeats over and over. But it's also what like drives me forward. And I do think when Daniel was mentioning that person that's writing to grow his cult, or for all the wrong ego based reasons or whatever, I could certainly see how I may have started out that way, because I started out in journalism. And if you're in journalism school and you say like, oh, I write novels, people are like, oh, sure you do. You know what I mean? You flake. So yeah, I feel like I started out chip on my shoulder, something to prove. Whereas now it's become like such an integral part of who I am and what I do and like how I live my life, and everything I do sort of informs the process. So it has become a much more like organic and wholesome and fulfilling thing over time, even if I started out with many of the uglier traits and tendencies.
I'd have a question for anyone who'd want to answer it. I find like I think my output is lower than many people who kind of are as dedicated as I feel to writing. But part of that for me is that like I become obsessive to the point of like not sleeping anymore, like when I'm like deep into something. And so I have to like take a day off or several days off in order to like have a normal life to some degree. And I find like I don't know if this is like a good tendency or a bad tendency, that I just get like so deep into something that it's like disruptive. But yeah, I'd be curious whether, because I guess I found it difficult to like establish sort of like the daily writing practice that people talk about. And part of me is like, maybe that's fine. Maybe I'm more of like an ebb and flow person and that works for me. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know, maybe there is like a way to kind of find a bit more balance or figure out how to unwind so that a daily habit could not just like derail things.
I'll start because I'm gonna step away in a minute and I'll just be listening for a little bit while I eat. But I wanted to say my process is nowhere close to what I want it to be. I think that with Mike and Daniel or Benjamin Studebaker, it's like they write on such a regular basis. It's just a part of their life. They've found something. Whereas me, I am almost always doing organizing related work, and it drives me absolutely crazy that if I go for like 4 or 5 days without some serious reading time, I start to go a little crazy. I can do writing like randomly, like especially if it's something specific that kind of spurs it. Like if I've been thinking about like this thing for a couple of weeks, like it keeps coming back and I'm like, huh. And then one day, like light bulb goes off and I'm like, aha, I have it. And then and it's not that I have it figured out. It's that I know enough to figure it out. And the writing is the figuring it out what it is that there's some kind of an idea. I've been trying to go, what is this idea? And I'm thinking about it. And then I'm like, oh, I can think through this idea if I do it right now. And that's whether it's on the toilet or on the pulling over on the side of the road or, I mean, really anywhere and everywhere. I've walked out of movie theaters and gone to the bathroom to write a couple thousand words, a couple of times, and it's when it hits me, I have what I call the up-to-itiveness, and the up-to-itiveness principle is that if I feel up to it, then I have a special kind of energy that I cannot rely on returning to me. I have been entrusted by the all-knowing energy. This is the moment. So it's like, I was going to do this thing, but I have the up-to-itiveness to do this thing. Now, the thing is that I can have the up-to-itiveness to do a bunch of emailing. Just because you have up-to-itiveness doesn't mean you should do it. You shouldn't leave the movie theater to go do a bunch of emails because you have the up-to-itiveness if you're with people. But for writing is my one sacred thing where it's like, no, if I have the up-to-itiveness for the writing, I will do it, because nothing kills me worse than like the miscarriage of an idea where it's like, I had it, but I didn't cash in on it. It's like, yeah, I could have taken it to the bank and gotten cash for the, think of like, you've got like a currency and you're like, I could take this to the bank and get this into dollars right now. And then you're like, I'll put it off. And then like that currency crashes. It's like actually tanked. Now it's like worthless that you have this. And that's kind of how I feel sometimes. But then I also want to say that Daniel's talking about trusting yourself and realizing if there's also this other side of that, where if it's worth saying and you've been thinking about it, you should be able to trust yourself and say, I can always write about this. Like, so I feel torn in those two directions. I implement the two principles, in different situations. And a part of it is like deadlines I'm up against and other things that I have to be doing. And I just always have to be making this kind of calculus, because it is just a complete mess. Because if I was actually doing all of the things that I'm supposed to be doing, I would explode. I would just literally die. But the writing, this approach to writing isn't, my philosophy portal presentation at the last conference, I went into energy time, and it's the opposite of time energy. It's the kind of random, or like, it's not random, it's the buildup of a certain kind of energy you get from productive procrastination as you approach a deadline. There's a special kind of energy in that. It's actually something I think that anybody who was successful in the schooling system has a deep relationship with. And if you were not successful in the schooling system, you might still have a relationship with that kind of accomplishment, but it's probably not as good of a relationship. And so, yeah, I guess I'll just wrap it up for now by saying it's like, trust yourself on the one side, but also write the damn thing. And then bring it back around to this draft mode approach. Everything I write is in draft mode. I live in a world where I check my own groceries at the grocery store most of the time. And that is, it's the same principle being applied to writing. It's like, it's like I've had plenty of people message me about spelling errors and stuff like that. And it's like, cool, if you want to do that every once in a blue moon, that's fine. But after a person starts thinking that I want that kind of feedback, it's like, actually, I don't. Like, if I had my way, the internet would work like Quora used to. On that site, people could suggest edits to your post and then you could accept them or not. I loved that. And it even taught me how to write a little bit. But instead, for the time being, everyone in my relationships or networks is expected to check their own groceries in when it comes to my ideas. And it's not because I disrespect their time and energy, but it's like, I just can't do anything other than what I'm doing. And so if you're willing to do a little bit of like, oh, what does that mean? Oh, that's what that means. Oh, it's just the one word, the word was wrong. Well, yeah, I'm fine with that because I'm not writing fiction. And so if you get thrown out of the moment, I don't give a shit, because I write in a genre where you getting thrown out of the moment is actually part of the form itself in a sort of sense. Now, that can become an excuse. It can become a crutch. And of course, we want to counter the degree to which it can become a crutch or an excuse. I don't think that this whole, oh, we're in draft mode and this is 2 or 0, and like that kind of approach can become oh, well, we're not going to think about it until we're actually in it. And then it'll be full of bugs and errors. And I don't even care because, oh, we're so punk. I'm not saying that either. So everything that I've put on the table in this monologue is something that has an opposite sort of counter to, and so that you really kind of do have to walk and chew bubble gum there. Yeah.
Well, not to jump in again, but that was all magnificent. So there's a few things. So on the question of the inspiration, there's something else I was going to say. Oh, I was also going to say, like, the best way to write something is go meet people. Like, you'd be amazed how inspired you come with ideas to meet people. Like actually, I do. It's almost like people, books, like people, like meeting people who have read books also is like the best. Like, that tends to be what inspires you to write more than like, I should, like using a moral thrust. So go socialize if you want to write. Like, which sounds bizarre, but actually, I think it's not by chance that so many creatives are part of what? Communities. You would say, oh, no. Here, okay, so here, like a lot of times you say, oh, the reason this community formed because a bunch of artists like came together because they were artists. Actually, a lot of times in history, the reason the artists come together is because there's something that becomes possible in coming together that otherwise was not possible, right? Like Randall Collins is very good on this. When you look at like the Bloomsbury group, for example, you go, oh, the Bloomsbury group was like all the all-stars, like Keynes and Wolfe and Ramsey and Wilkinson. The key, no. They became all-stars because they came together. They didn't come together because they were all-stars. It was they were good, and then they came together, and that actually led to a quote-unquote network effect that made them all-stars. And so that, I think, is a point. Also, Mike, what you were saying was very, very good. Because the commitment, like what you were describing about, you've done it for so many years. Like, I'm not sure if there's, like, whatever motivation one has, however maybe viceful or maybe egotistical, I don't think that there's any motivation that with commitment can't become a virtue. And I don't think that there isn't any virtuous motivation that can't become a vice without commitment. I think the commitment, the giving yourself over, has a natural correcting process if you do that. You can have the best intentions in the world, and if you don't have the commitment, I think they tend to erode. And I think you could have the worst intentions in the world, but if you really give yourself over to the thing and let it have its say over you versus you control it, it'll turn you into a virtuous thing. The commitment, I think, is So critical. The other thing on the burst that you were describing here, I've like, look, when To Turn the World showed up, I stayed up for 72 hours. When Blackout showed up, if for a novel was 5 weeks, like the burst thing occurs, absolutely. And it is not a bad, I definitely find the burst thing can be very, very good. Like when freaking The Savior Digressions in 2040, it was 1 week of 3 hours of sleep. Like that could be a very powerful thing. So that can be a wonderful thing. The stuff with Dave. I also agree with Dave. Like when the thing comes, whatever you're doing, that can occur. You can suddenly be 7 at night, going to bed, and bam. Yes, nothing else matters. Clear it aside. I consider those. I do think I guess when I think about writing, there's the method, the regular method, that is always open to the possibility of something breaking in. So it's a kind of open method, right? Like you every day, you have these sort of things that you do to create habits and regularity, but then there is always the 7 at night one day, bam, and everything comes to a standstill, right? Everything's off the table because something just showed up and I don't know where I am anymore. I'm in some sacred space. Yes, you should give yourself, I think that's part of the commitment. If that occurs, then you give yourself over. But I would say this, your ability to capture well the power that comes in that moment is contingent upon the regular disciplines you have. Like artists always ask about, is it inspiration or technique? If you don't have technique and the inspiration shows up, you can't capture it. So one of the reasons you do a routine is to be ready for those moments so that you capture them well and honor them well, and you're able to finish the thing. Technique is in service of the inspiration, but so there's always, it's kind of like the Heideggerian clearing. Like I think about routines and techniques as making the space in the clearing for the possibility of that break to occur, right? So that's very, I think about that a lot. Another thing I wanted to say that I forgot about that's really important is I decide the night before what I'm going to work on the next day. And what I mean by that is I usually so for example, I'm trying to add a section to the paper on tragic sociology that really brings out Martha Nussbaum, puts it in the context of Philip Reef, and then brings it into what I want to, the other parts of that paper. Well, it's kind of jumbled and I don't have it. So what I did is about 8 is I wrote the notes in the order I think they're going to go in that are all there. So when I wake up tomorrow, I'm not looking at a blank sheet of paper. I'm looking at not a hard outline, but a kind of scattered associational outline that I think go together and I have a sense of it. Let your sleeping do a lot of your work. Because if you the night before do that, it's kind of in your brain, I find. And then when you sleep, you wake up the next morning and a lot of stuff has come together that you didn't know would come together. But that is by determining the night before. Like the night before, you set the outline of the canvas you're going to look at the next day. Like, because then your brain can latch onto something that it's already been working on the entire night before to put together. I'm also a strong believer, like when I was like in some of the fiction writing, like I wanted Turn the World to bring together Flannery O'Connor, William Faulkner, and actually the manga writer Ieto, who did all like the horror manga stuff. It's really, really weird, but I really like him. I think he's a genius. So I wanted those things to come together. So literally verbatim, copied verbatim to myself the paragraphs of The Sound and the Fury that I love the most, and Absalom, and just did that as a process, because something that Benjamin Franklin said really struck me. He said he taught himself how to write by copying verbatim newspaper clippings. He just copied them. You never publish it, you're just copying them. I definitely for 10 years did that. I have it, it's the books document, like thousands of just going back through books and writing like verbatim paragraphs of it, right? And just verbatim writing paragraphs of Faulkner, writing paragraphs of O'Connor, writing some of the dialogue of Ieto. And then when I go to the Turn the World, that's come together. So like, honestly, like just writing verbatim some of your favorite paragraphs or writers and just making that your discipline. Let's say you say, well, I don't like, make that your first discipline. Just going through some of the books you love, and actually then you have a reserve of citations, right? Like they're on your computer. Like that can be really good because now you've got all these citations and you're training yourself how to write it and to at least get into the discipline and habit of writing to make that clearing, while you're also making a library of citations that are of writers you want to write more like anyway, and you're building that. And then what I found is by doing that, when the BAMs showed up, when the things showed up, my ability to capture it or to roll with it or finish it or put it in the voice I wanted it to be was far, far, far higher. So yeah, I meant to say that one of the most important things is the night before to know what you're going to do the next day. I don't personally want to wake up the next day and ask the morning you want to make as few choices as possible. That's important. Do not in the morning make a bunch of choices. You should have decided the night before what you were going to wear. You should have had the coffee in the coffee filter the night before. Everything you need to make as little choices in the morning as possible. And this is why your brain is radically right brain in like active, right? And it's really, really alive. When you make a choice, you move it toward the left brain. Every choice you make moves the right to the left. Okay? Because it has to reduce to choose. Choice is an act of reducing, choosing the options, right? Creativity is a widening expanse, right? The less choices you can make in the morning because you made them the night before, the longer you can preserve the space of the creative unfolding that you can then put on the paper, right? So like I basically wear the same thing every morning. Like it's a uniform basically, right? I have the same like this time. I get up at the same time. There's very, very few choices, and I decided the night before what I was going to work on, so I don't make that choice the next morning. I just find myself going into, with that right brain, the left brain structure that was made the night before, right? So I find that super important, actually, because I found when in the morning, and I'll stop. I found in the morning, if I had to choose what I was going to write, I got confused because my mind was so expansive on all the possibilities that you're like, I could do anything. I could do anything. Well, and then you don't do anything because when you could do anything is when you don't do anything because you could do anything. So how do you choose X instead of Y? And you freeze up, right? So like I find like that personally for me can be helpful.
Yeah, if I could jump in, that was great. And I wanted to say something similar about method. You said it much better than I would have. But what I saw was, okay, so we take Kier's point. She gets too engaged or so engaged that she has to take a step away. And then Dave has these windows where he knows he's going to get these ideas out very effectively and he won't waste those. And I was like that for many years where I didn't have like a daily practice. And I knew those times I would be the guy running to the bathroom or whatever. And so I think what would benefit both of them, maybe, even though they have seemingly, they're on two poles, is there's a lot of just grunt work involved in writing, like you preparing your notes the night before, like that is part of the process as well. You don't have to be in a state of ecstatic inspiration if you're Dave, and if you're Kier, you don't have to be subjecting yourself to more of the load, right? You can or if you don't have anything to say, you can always be creating those notes, getting yourself ready so that when the inspiration does come, you are ready to go. No food in the stomach, first thing in the morning, off to the races.
I think that's brilliant. I always thought creating the space was a better language for me than, the discipline. I'm going to write 500 words. I'm going to write, like, you are doing that. But when you actually primarily think about it, creating the clearing or creating the space or having the notes, like you were saying, Mike. So when the inspiration hits you, bam, you go for it. That's more of how I thought about it. And then I do think there comes, I do wonder if like in the beginning of creative work, there's like a great variety of different ways in, but the longer you're in it, there's a convergence. Like there's a lot of different starting points, but there's a certain convergence after year 20. Like I've thought about it, like, because you'll hear a lot of writers who will say, yeah, when I started, I would every morning work, but then when I got to 60, I actually would take walks in the forest And actually there was like an ability to just enter into the writing mode more freely because it became their habitus. I think that's true. So then the question is kind of figuring out the similarities and patterns, but realizing the difference to get to that place in 20 years. But that does mean I definitely think the number one key to all of this is the long-term commitment. You say, I write, and that's it. Well, if that's so, if you write, then you will figure it out. You know, you're going like, if that is given, you will figure it out and you will experiment and work. But if you don't say to yourself, I write, well, then your life can't be a process of experimentation because it's always tenable that you write. You may just say, no, I don't. Like definitely if you're at this, I think if you get at that age, maybe I'm not saying like at 12 you have to feel it, but I do think there's something where you get to the point where you say, no, this is me. This is me. This thing is me. Well, own it. And once you own it, then you figure it out because it's your ground, right? So then it's just experimenting for the best way to work the ground versus spending all your time should I even be standing here? Should I be even standing here? Well, you can do that forever and then you don't do anything. Once you accept it's the ground, then you just figure out how to till it right. So that commitment, I think, is really, really big. And I definitely like what you were saying there on that idea of the grunt work is creating the space for the fire. And I also do think, I think it was Picasso who said, you know, I believe in inspiration. It just happens to show up every day at 7:30. You know, where you get into a habit where you're used to being in the same place at the same time. I don't think it happens at first, but after 3 years, I definitely think you can habituate yourself into a kind of inspiration. Not after a month, but if every day for 3 years, you around 7:30 or 7 are at your desk working, then actually there can be more of a regular reliance. You increase the probability of the thing coming forward. But I had to get there through years of running to the bath. Like I had it, like that years of finding the time and getting there. I think that is absolutely a very healthy thing. And there can be ways, but then you got to like figure out what jobs to do and money. And I understand that. But there is this, I don't think it's a week. I don't think it's a month. But I do think there's like, it's some unsexy number, not 5 years. It's like three years and 2 months. Then I believe in unsexy numbers personally. I really believe in unsexy numbers. Like, I think you can accomplish your goals in like 16 years and 3 months. It's not some round number like 20 or 15. It's some unsexy number. And I think that's how a lot of new habits are formed. Just one day every 17 months, you find that showing up in the same place actually gives rise to inspiration. I definitely think that can occur. But you start that by thinking of the work you're doing as preparing the ground of just the rote work of the paragraphs so that when the inspiration shows up, you're able to capture it. I like how Mike put that.
I think that's why we like. I was just gonna say that's why we like Illich. That's why we like Illich. That's why we like Gores. We are very much aware of the fact that we are already totally captured, totally instrumentalized. We are the PCFM. We have to find a way to instrumentalize ourselves harder, better, faster, stronger if we ever want to escape. And it really is this like having discipline. I think for me, like discipline, when I discovered self-control, it emancipated me, right? And I learned it in basic training. I learned it when I was completely broken down and turned into an instrument of war fighting. But like just the ability to like, oh, I control my body. I control my reactions. I may not control my feelings, but I do control my deep thoughts and I do control my intention. And yeah, learning skills, learning new habits. It is about setting yourself up for success. Because those moments exist, but those moments are few and far between. And I think we all have experienced those moments, and we may tend to romanticize those moments. But yeah, you have to lay the groundwork to be able to capitalize on them when they arrive. So yeah, that's why read Gores, read Illich. That's why don't do like Nick Land and just like take meth and become a cockroach. Become a badass motherfucker. What were you gonna say, Dave?
You brought up the PCFM towards the end of his last thing here. Daniel touched on how, yeah, you probably have to find a different kind of job. And that recalcitrant or obstinate, no, I will not do this kind of work that makes it so I can't keep thinking about the things I want to think about, is one of the sort of lifelines out of just being constantly exhausted and then having random bursts of energy that can't be harnessed to any real projects. And I'm still in between lifestyles, and I still have the habitus of an Amazon worker, and the neoliberal university doesn't help that situation, because every one of my days in the week is wildly different than every other day in my week. And no two Sundays can be reliably made the same. No two Saturdays can be reliably made the same. No two Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. And so it's like every day is so different. But I have done some things to deliberately step it up. And one of them is like, it doesn't take intuitiveness to do note taking. It takes, there's a sort of like, oh, I could do these 6 different things. I could do note taking right now. And then some of those other like video editing, getting on my calendar and doing some accounting or what. No, I can do those things later. I'm going to go and just spend a few hours at the coffee shop, and it's about creating the space. And I go, as I'm going, I'm like, maybe I'll write something, but here's what I'm for sure doing is I'm going over these passages of this book that I was listening to while being between buildings last week, because I keep thinking about that one passage or whatever. This is a transient sort of on the move and shifting gears kind of stage of my life, because I'm not working at Amazon. And so, and I'm not a student, and I'm more secure in my housing. But every one of those factors creates a huge wrench in the process for a lot of people. So that's why I liked that, Nance, you led off with the PCFM. We are it. It's not everyone's experience. And Skole is this thing that we don't want to just do it because we're weirdos. We think it's the condition of freedom itself. And some of us just aren't free yet. And in my case, I kind of am more free, yet still have the habitus of that person, that Amazon worker, as well as, the neoliberal university and what it does to my calendar. And so, the thing is once I find my new routine, guess what? There's 2 more courses I'm teaching in the spring. And once that's over, if I were to find a routine before June, guess what? Come June, I'm looking to a fall, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be living in Boise that fall. Ann and I are in the process of trying to figure out where we're going to be. And that's one of the craziest things about, it's not just the semester. It's also like where you're going to be, if you're going to be moving, blah, 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 blah. But I'm also really excited about clearing like a whole month or a year to be able to focus on writing. And one of the big goals at TU is that the seminarians are going to have a rotating, what's the word? Forget. You get away for a year.
Sabbatical?
Sabbatical. Thank you. Yeah. I've been lobotomized by the neoliberal university. I'm not even supposed to remember that word anymore. They don't want us to remember that word. So they're like, what, sabbatical? That's not important for the life of the mind. You don't need that to be a researcher. No, just hustle and grind. But anyway, I'm going to go eat some pancakes. I'm listening. I love you guys. This is awesome. This is very inspiring. I know Anne is like doing gymnastics downstairs. She's getting amped up. She's tired, but she's also stoked on all of this. It's inspiring. And it's kind of like some of you who've gotten a taste of freedom or have gotten accustomed to it at this point, you're able to help us start approaching that new way of life in a sort of sense. And this is why I was like, Mikey, I got to get you on. You got to talk about your writing process before you were working at the warehouse, because for basically 20 years, he was able to grind on just whatever he wanted every day. And he did line by line commentaries on like 10 of his favorite books, where the commentaries are longer than the books. So it's like, if you add the red letters that he's added to the books, it's like that book is now 5 times longer, because he's added so much to it. It's like, yeah, that's the kind of thing I want to be able to do. I just want to be able to get into the habit of doing stuff like that. And it's like Mikey sharing those stories, Mike, Daniel, you guys sharing your stories about kind of finding and refining the habitus of an author and not just being a busybody, worker all the time. Like, it is actually helping us see a way out. So I didn't have adult role models in my life who were doing that. It's a much more recent thing to meet people who actually prioritize the life of their mind. And it's actually pretty rare at the college and universities that I've attended so far. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Tyler, man, you've been awful quiet, and I want to respect that because I understand. But I also I would like to hear something from you, man. Your thoughts, your contributions, how you thinking, how you feeling.
Yeah, thanks, Nance. I've been kind of like wanting to jump in here and there because for about 14 years I've been pretty much a professional artist, and a lot of this is a lot of everything that Daniel is saying I've lived through, at least in the sense of not being a writer but being an artist. And for 5 years I painted every single day, and that afforded me the ability to now, where if I have an idea in my head, and maybe a good photo reference or a study that I've done from life, I can turn it into something that will, pay for my life. Yeah, so I'm trying to, I've been writing down different things here, like Mike talking about this, having some sort of this kind of delusion of thinking of yourself, thinking of what you've just written as like the best piece of writing ever. I totally feel that all the time when I'm painting, and it's crazy, but it's always like, like this piece is on my easel right now. It's like, this is the best painting. I had to switch because I had to turn my setup around because I wanted you guys to see what's currently on my easel versus, a painting that I did, 10 years ago or something, that lives here in my studio because nobody's going to ever buy it. But other kind of, rituals that happen throughout my life would be, I have art walk every 2 months, which means that my studio here is open to the public every 2 months, which means that I always try to make new work. I have to clean this place up, tidy it up. I always want to have something new to show. I want to give away wine and cheese. I want the experience to be, something beneficial for everybody. And kind of thinking of that with regards to everything that we're doing with Theory Underground, and like, there's something about that. Maybe it's this once a year thing of TUCon. There's something about having these moments of contact with concrete others that I think is so important. For me, it's in my artwork. It is the art walk. The other thing that I wrote down is one thing we do, my friends and I, we have this event that we call Art Lab. And that is something we've done for like 10 years now. And every 3 to 4 months we get together and we art lab, and we create for, 4 to 5 days. We just basically lock ourselves in. Either I'll go visit them or they'll come visit me, or we meet over Zoom now. And it's like, we're going to create as much work as we possibly can. And typically there is like an event, or one of us might have a show that is at the end of that. And so it's really helpful to, hey, I've got this show, the deadlines are coming up, let's art lab for the next handful of days. yeah, those are, I guess that's some of the stuff that's on my mind. I don't know if that's helpful to this conversation or not, but yeah, that's what's on my mind, Nance.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate your perspective. I think the first time I talked to you, it was centering around art and like the production of art and our relationship to art. And I'm a sometimes pretend artist. So I really do appreciate your feedback. Thank you. Labor and love, like what we're doing is a labor of love, and that includes like this instrumental side where we have to prepare the ground and set ourselves up for success, but we also can't forget about the love part. And I think maybe a lot of people struggle with like holding the tension with both. You know, you either go too far in one direction and you become an automaton and you just produce fucking lithographs or screen printed t-shirts, or you become a loosey-goosey LSD poet. And I don't know, maybe at times in my life I've resembled either one of those, but I think at least I know I'm trying to approach like a rigorous thing. And yeah, I'd like just the other day, Daniel, like you heard me freaking out about like, am I just creating content or am I trying to contribute to like an ongoing conversation that exists outside of me? That's like a deep insecurity for me. I always question what I'm doing here, but I've also been in love with writing since I was probably 12. So yeah, it's difficult. And I do appreciate everyone here right now and everyone watching on YouTube and everyone watching this in the future and everyone involved with Theory Underground and the net and Philosophy Portal and this strange, ungainly beast that we're trying to create with these liminal webs, right? And these outstitutions. I mean, I am able to do something I've long wanted to do, and it's because of all of you, and I appreciate that deeply and sincerely. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Indeed. Yeah.
I would really love to hear real quick, like where Kier, where you're at with your piece, because I absolutely loved your talk that you gave at TUCon. I would just love to hear where you're at with writing it, and look forward to reading it sometime.
Oh, thank you, Tyler. I listened to your talk the other day, and yes, I have. I really enjoyed it, and yes, I'm going to message you with more details on that. But yeah, writing the piece. So I was like, I got involved with TU only back, I think, in July or August, and it was kind of like this, yeah, procession where I was like, oh, I don't have time to join this thing. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'll join it. And then I was like, okay, cool. But I definitely, like, I can't do anything for the conference because I need to work on this other stuff. And then I was like, oh, well, okay, I'll put something together. And then, so I just kind of fell backwards into it. Which does mean that like I do still kind of feel like I'm flying by the seat of my pants. But I guess at the same time, it's like, so I would say like the actual talk I gave came together pretty quickly, which is, yeah, not something I'm like proud of or ashamed of. It just, that's how it happened. But I think like, yeah, writing the paper is interesting because it is making me like really kind of think back on like where did these different pieces come from, right? Because like I've actually probably never written anything with citations, or at least not in a very long time, and I really do want to, yeah, bring these different writers like into dialogue with each other in the piece. So that's kind of been fun to be like, okay, like I'm not just like fully making all of this up. Like I've read a bunch of stuff over the years that like over time has come together in this way. So I think it's coming together, but I think I'm struggling with like the like where I want to land at the end, and whether I feel like I have created a piece that like gets us somewhere, because I do feel like this paper is like the very first step in what I'm seeing as like a very long-term research project. So that's, I would say that's sort of the challenge is, at this point, not getting bogged down too much in the citations or not procrastinating by like scrolling through ebooks and really trying to like, yeah, to get somewhere, so that the piece kind of holds together. That's what I'd say. Yeah. Oh, one other thing I would say is just like I've been a polemicist for so long that like it's really interesting like trying to shift into a different mode. Because I would have said like my favorite thing to write is a manifesto for a very long time. So we'll see. Like I'm trying to bring this like earnest curiosity, and catch myself if I'm like, oh yeah, it really took someone down a peg with that sentence, right? Because that's not the goal in this piece.
I just want to say that I love that you're treating it that way. I think that's awesome. And I'm excited about all of the projects you're all working on. And I feel inspired after this. And I know that before I go to bed, I'm going to get on the whiteboard or on Google Docs from my phone, depending on if I'm laying on the couch or if I'm standing over by the wall there. And either way, I'm going to be drafting really, really short versions, like one sentence long for each of the things that I want to do tomorrow. Like, and I'll probably have 6 things I'm writing tomorrow, and I'll be bouncing between those. So I'm going to wake up early, hit the coffee shop. And, you know, for a lot of people, the space that you're in is super important for kind of making that clearing possible. I mean, when you're struck by the bolt of lightning, you can write anywhere, but you should have a place in mind, you know, if you're going to leave in the morning. I like the idea of having the outfit already figured out, you know, that's a great idea, Daniel. And so, yeah, I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to go start thinking about it right now, you know. Yeah, well,
carry a notebook, dude. Carry a notebook.
Yeah, I should carry just a real notebook, but I like the Google Docs. I do.
Dude, nope. You can't. No, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We're living in the future. We have to wage war against the machine god. Take the first step. Be a responsible adult. Slow yourself down. Be a big boy.
Man, I just don't know about that. I love writing on my phone now.
No, I know.
I do.
Look, as long as we're self-aware and we're always like critiquing, I think we can use the master's tools.
Okay. Well, hold on, folks. Hold on. I do have like 1,000 pages that look like this in my house right now. So I have stacks and milk crates and I sift through them and I do look through. So it's not, you know, it's a little more decentralized than the little notebook. And I kind of felt, I don't know. I don't like the notebook so much as like, I like these big pieces of paper, but I think a much more established version of this process will involve folders. There'll be folders and the different, and I'll get elaborate in my categorization eventually. But for now, I do go through my stacks. I don't want people to think pens are absolutely essential and absolutely like, I feel like there's something very important about these G2 pens and these 8.5 by 11 white pieces of paper with no lines, right? But I can also use line paper. I do prefer the blank slate. So, but okay. I just realized I was making it sound like it's whiteboard or the Google Docs, but also no, there's a kind of thinking that requires pen and paper. And I think it's mostly for charting like new ideas or for bringing them together in relation to one another. You can do it on a whiteboard, but it can be better to do it on a piece of paper. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just being sensational. Dave is actually very aware of his media habits, and it's quite intimidating.
I forgot.
Yeah. But just for people who are watching and didn't forget, I was just having a little jokey joke. I do think I think it takes a lot to get where you are. I mean, I think it takes a lot to get where we all are. That's why, again, I kind of wanted to have us all on to have a little water cooler session and just reflect on the fact that this is a milestone. I don't know, man. I'm all in my feelings and stuff. So.
I like feelings. Feelings are good. I like
sure.
feelings.
Yeah.
I like feelings.
Uh-oh. I lost my page in my notebook. Well, I think I'm going to go, oh, shucks.
Did we lose Kier?
Yeah, she's Audi 5000.
Yeah, they're right.
We gotta get out of here.
It's all mirrored. Shoot.
I think
Feels.
I think I can read that.
Feels. Okay, cool. Feels.
Look, everybody, it's a butt.
Uh-oh. You can't show that on the internet, man.
Just kidding. It's a heart. Just kidding.
Oh. Did you know the problematic origins of the heart is actually the female butt?
Nuh-uh.
I think I learned that on BreadTube once. Like the no, but for
It's
real
probably
though.
a lie.
No, it's real. I looked it up. Like the heart is a little booty, and we're oppressing women when we use hearts.
Nice.
And so we all learn something.
Always looking for a new way.
Yeah.
It's like,
Calm women down, you know.
my kids are drawing hearts, and I'm like, no, we can't. Can't do that now.
It's unacceptable.
Well, yeah, that's wrong.
Sorry. draw a bunny or a cricket. I don't know, but not that.
and
Draw
and
a cricket.
And so oppressed. I know, Anne. I know. That's what we ultimately. This was a trap to oppress you.
She said, "I'm so oppressed. Heart. Broken heart.
Those are broken hearts. Yeah.
Oh no. What have we done?
The worst.
We have done the worst. But yeah. I don't know. I think I'm gonna go. Oh, what's up?
Last thing, I guess,
Yep.
before I know you're closing it out. Last thing in terms of announcements, I just want to say for everybody who's watching this, who's not a TU subscriber, but was a presenter or will be involved with any of the reading groups, I want to get you in if you're interested in getting in to the seminar presentations happening on Saturday and Sunday. Mikey's doing his, I'm doing mine. They're both going to be pretty in depth. Mikey's is going to be about what is philosophy. Mine is going to be about socioanalysis as opposed to psychoanalysis and the relationship between the two. And I'm really excited about that. That's not something anyone on the internet that I'm aware of is talking about, but it's absolutely essential. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, socioanalysis is not cool at all. It's whatever. But no, if you follow Bourdieu through his seminars, he is developing this concept, and he gets into questions like what would be good survey questions as opposed to bad survey questions in terms of like what gets you to the actual field of struggle and the field of power, and how do you know the difference, and blah, blah, blah. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. And it's not to say you throw out psychoanalysis, but some things that psychoanalysis explains might be better explained by field and habitus. But then again, there's going to be things where it's like, actually, nope, this is just a way of fleshing out the symbolic order and its relation to the real. So there's all kinds of ways to play with it. It's something that is going to be like the next decade of the theory scene. You want to get in on the ground floor, I promise you. But besides that, get your shit in on Sunday night, and we're excited to look at it. We're really excited to read your work, and I'm really, really looking forward to it, everybody. We're going to have a lot of fun reading over one another's stuff. And that's ultimately why we picked your piece. If your piece got picked, it's because we're excited about it. We didn't pick anything that we were like, oh, that's boring. Don't care. No, the recognition's already in place. Yeah, Daniel. Yeah. Oh, they're bored by my piece. Yeah. No, absolutely not. There was one other thing, and I feel like I'm losing it. It was almost more important than the 2 seminars. And it was related to an event, something coming up very soon. Oh, thank God I remembered. November 20th is the next MSTU. We're going to feature some TUCon presentations, and there are presentations that had butchered audio, and it was very sad. And I should have sent everybody whose audio got roasted like an official email saying, I see you, but I can't hear you, and it's breaking my heart. But I didn't do that. And so I hope that someone who is needing to hear that now knows that I feel that way. And don't worry. I hope that you'll do the presentation again for us. I personally am still like, well, I can't do that again. It was too situational. It was too perfect in the moment. I don't even remember what I said. I just spoke from my heart and had I had Benjamin Studebaker earnestly listening right there in the room. And there were other people, and they laughed at crucial moments and showed that they were following along and taking notes. And it was like, and now what? I'm supposed to do that over Zoom? It just doesn't feel the same. And so missing that, I'm like, oh no. And I realized that other people might be feeling the same way. I know Nance is feeling that. Anne is feeling that. Wait, no, Anne's not feeling that. Anne didn't have that happen, right?
Yes, she did.
Who else is feeling that way?
One of hers is gone as well.
Fuck. Yeah, one of Anne's is gone.
Yeah.
But if you see my hat here, I think it's time that we actually say, what does this hat say? It says shit show supervisor. And fact is I'm the shit show supervisor. And it was, pretty good for a shit show. It's only going to get better over time. We're not making excuses. We're committed to always upping our game. And it does feel like one of those deep losses that we are missing some of that footage. But TU is still here. We're only going to get better. We want to hear your presentation. If your piece got roasted, please talk to me. You can either present it on the MSTU, or if the times won't work out, you can present it before or after one of the upcoming seminar events, or we'll do a special event on a Friday next week or something like that. Who knows? I'm down for whatever. Just work with me. But we get Thanksgiving week off. I'm definitely down to do something then, especially at the beginning of that week. So, because I'll be traveling later in that week, but yeah, early that week I'm available. So, okay, that's my update. Basically, yeah, some files got roasted. You can redo. Don't worry. Also, the MSTU on the 20th is going to be amazing. We're going to have lots of guests. Most of them are leftists. For people who aren't super invested in the field of left and post-left stuff, well, you're going to be bored. You will not find anything interesting, I promise. Just kidding. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be a great time. And, the main reason is the right-wingers I like the most won't come on to you. We're too left coded for them. Yeah. Like the ones I'm most interested in talking to, they're just like, I'm not going to respond. Well, that's on them. And so when people are like, well, why are there so many lefties if it's not a leftist channel? Well, folks, I work with the people I'm interested in talking to who will respond. So some of the people, I'm not going to name any names right now. You've probably heard me name them behind closed doors, but so they're right there. We all see them, and they know we're over here, and our people are over there mentioning us. And then they're saying, oh, they're too left. They're too Marxist. Or they're going, oh, they're too right. They're too right. But like mostly it's the other way around. So anyway, thank you, Kier. Thank you, Nance. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Anne, for being here all this time. Thank you, all the people in the live chat. That's what I had to say. Thank you so much. I'm so stoked you guys put this on. I think the water cooler should be a thing that you guys do whenever you're feeling up to it. If you have the up-to-itiveness, I think it's a great thing. So thank you.
Yeah, man.
It's been super cool. You're all really cool.
Thanks so much, Nance. Good to see you, Daniel.
Good to see you, Tyler. You rock. And your presentation was hot. I really loved it. It was really beautiful. Very well done. Mike, really good to see you, sir. Your recent Substack article was stunning. Everyone should read that. I just thought that was wonderful.
Glad to do it.
Yes, sir. So this was cool. I agree with Dave. The water cooler is super cool. It was a wonderful idea.
Awesome possum. Peace out, everybody. I'm gonna hit the end stream button. Bye,
So
YouTube.
long, farewell.
You gotta wait like
sleep
10 seconds or
well,
it'll cut it off too soon.
Sleep well.
Yeah, I'm watching Daniel, so I know.
Sleep
Just
well.
keep doing
Sleep well. Sleep well.
Bye bye, YouTube.
Sleep